We're going to be doing something with bypassing. So that's going to be topic number 1.
Oh, okay.
But leading into topic number 1, we're going to start with topic number 2.
Okay.
Which is we're going to be putting the wrong filters inside the Kalita.
Yeah.
So, of course, this right here. What is this?
This is the Kalita Wave filter.
You got it.
Yeah.
How about what do these remind you of?
These right here.
Mm-hmm.
These are V60 filters.
Mm-hmm. You saw it. As Dante pointed out, these are v60 filters, right? We're going to be shoving them in the Kalita because it is really favorable for this recipe. So we're just going to act like we're using a v60. Just going to take our nice little filters here, but instead of just popping it in like so, we're going to fold the bottom of it. So I'm just making a little bitty fold and make it flat across the bottom. Voila. Pretty simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pop it in, and then you're just going to rinse your filter as you normally would.
Mm-hmm. We're doing all this sitting down because this is a challenge for all you baristas out there.
Whoa.
Y'all stand up all the time. All right?
Yeah.
Sit down.
Discard our rinse. All right, so we're not totally off the rails yet, but here comes the fun part, which is the recipe itself. I want the kettle to be lower temp. I'm going to take my grinder, and I'm going to have to kind of flip it around here. Let's see. It's already in the right grind size. We're about at a 9 on our Varia grinder here, which is somewhat coarse for most filter coffee brew methods. And I'm going to weigh out, I'm going to do 25 grams of coffee. So I'll just put, we're using an anaerobic naturally processed coffee that Ravenous has roasted for us. This is a really interesting coffee, and I think it's a perfect one to be using for this style recipe, where we're going to be both using the incorrect filter in the brewer, as well as bypassing using a weird ratio.
That smells amazing.
Have you not had this one yet?
Uh-uh.
All right, well, this is going to be a first for Dante all the way around.
Hey.
The biggest thing that we're going to do here is, for our initial recipe, we're going to brew kind of concentrated. Lance Hendrick recently did a video talking about the AeroPress using Tetsu Kaisuma's AeroPress kind of base and then adjusted it for itself. Bypassing in and of itself is something that is really popular with immersion brewers, especially like the AeroPress, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest reason is that there's so little room in an AeroPress that making it really concentrated and then diluting at the end can be favorable if you're trying to make it stretch.
Okay.
I argue, though, that you can use a lot of those same principles with filter coffee, be it normal Kalita, normal v60, Chemex, something like that, or what we're doing where we're kind of making this brew a bit of a hybrid. So we're going to grind our coffee, and we'll come back to you. All right, so we got our coffee ground up here, guys. Remember, 25 grams, we're going a little bit coarser, a little bit of a lower brew temp, around the 90 Celsius range. So 25 grams in, and normally, Dante, if you were going to be using 25 grams of coffee in this kind of setup, what would your normal water volume be? Like, what would you go for?
Probably around 400.
Around 400?
Mm-hmm. If I were to guess accurately.
So like 400, if 400 is kind of like your just guesstimate, just divide that by 25 and let's see what our ratio is.
16.
So you're right on the money.
Right on it.
Right on the money. Dante,
it's almost like we're baristas or something.
Oh yeah, I feel like we do this all the time. So 1 to 16 will be the normal kind of range that most time you're shooting for. 25 grams in, 400 grams of water, bada bing, bada boom, good to go, right? What we're going to do, because we're trying to make this concentrated, because remember we're bypassing or diluting at the end of the brew, we're going to make that much more concentrated, and I'm going to use just 300 grams of water. So much lower brewing ratio overall.
Okay.
And I'll have those numbers up on the screen. Let's go ahead and get into our first pour. One big thing that I like to do with the first pour is kind of make it almost less than 1 to 2. Yeah, pretty close. And then to compensate for that, I will stir a bit. So for this technique, and especially for the way that this filter is in here, I'm doing deep stirs, flipping the grounds over is a really helpful thing. So now we're at about 30 seconds here, and I'm going to do my second pour. I'm doing this in 3 total pours. I'm going to pour up to 135 grams. I'm doing this pour pretty quickly. I'm not wasting a lot of time. Third and final pour, I'm going to pour straight to 300. We're currently at 50 seconds. We're going to wait until we get to at about 115 is kind of where I tend to pour the final one. I really use the brew bed more as a guide, and I start to see it get dry, so if it's sooner or later than that. Okay, so we're coming up on the 115 mark. It's not looking as dry as I want, so I'm gonna let it go a couple seconds longer. Maybe here in the 125 kind of range. Looking nice and somewhat dry. Not all the way dry to where it stops dripping completely. And I'm just gonna go ahead, pouring. Sometimes with this technique, the filter will kind of get stuck up on the side, so you do need to course correct occasionally and just redirect it.
Cool question. Since you like use this method often, what's like the biggest change? Like why would you even try to do this?
So I think for one thing, this is something that Lance pointed out in his video that I think is important to understand, is that with like normal filter style brews, the kind of TDS ranges that we're looking for are like in that 1 to 2, 1 to 1.5 kind of range. And this method, the TDS, I don't have the refractometer here with me today, but the TDS of this is going to be more than likely under extracted. And what you're able to do is kind of artificially boost that extraction up by diluting it. And what that does is that gives you more direct control over a really dynamic range of TDS values, essentially, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And another thing that I'm going to do whenever we come up on the end of the brew here, which we're coming up on it right at about 235, is I'm actually going to lower my brew temp, or my kettle temp, to like about 10 degrees cooler than it currently is before I bypass. And again, that is related to the TDS value. So we're at under 3 minutes, 2 minutes and 50 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and pull my over here. And I'll get us some glasses. But before I do that, let's get this kettle at a lower temp. So we're at 90 Celsius right now. Let's grab, so we're back with our filtered water, the same water that we used to put in the kettle. We're going to drop the temperature, ideally by around 10 degrees. I don't want it to get lower than 70 Celsius. That's too cool. But I also don't want it to be not cool enough. So we're just going to kind of try and eyeball it. Let's try and get it in that 80 Celsius. That's 10 degrees fully. Let's see. All right, 80 Celsius. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off because I don't want it to get back on the temp. We're at about 80 Celsius in this kettle. And first, let's kind of get some initial aroma impressions. So right now it smells really punchy, right? Like really concentrated. Ton of body in it.
Yep.
It's begging for dilution right now. For this coffee, I mentioned this is a good coffee to use for this recipe and this technique because this coffee is, I would not say it's overdeveloped, but it's definitely more developed than a typical hyper light roasted coffee. For that reason, a lower brewing ratio already is favorable.
Yeah.
So since 300 grams was our total brewing weight here, I'm actually going to reweigh the brew weight real quick. So I'm going to dump this out. We get what our brew weight is here in grams so we can kind of know what we're dealing with. So 243 grams, so about 50 grams of retention, which is actually kind of high. So I'm just going to pop this back in here. I'm going to start by adding just 50 grams. We'll taste it and kind of see what we think and then go from there. So that's 50 grams added. I get my add a little stir here. Let's give it some like initial smell impression as well. See what we're dealing with.
It's not as sharp as it was. It's a lot more perfumey now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think before, to where it was so concentrated, it was kind of like holds all like the aroma in like one center of the cup.
All right, let's give it a little taste. I'm just gonna like. It's pretty good. It's like a cherry bomb. It's interesting. I think it could probably be diluted a little bit further though. The back end still has a little bit of that like intense punchiness that comes with brewing at a low ratio. So let's maybe just add 30 more grams. Idealistically, in terms of these numbers, I don't want to add more than about 135 grams of water overall because that is when your numbers start to get really askew. You start to lose a lot of the dynamics that you might have otherwise. So this is now 30 additional grams added. So we have a total of 80 grams bypassed presently. See what we're dealing with. Now, if this was a lighter coffee, that 135, I would probably up to like 150, 180, somewhere in that range. But since it is a little bit of a more developed coffee, I'm gonna.
Why is that?
Just because there's more headroom with a light coffee in terms of what we're extracting flavor-wise. It's a little bit more forgiving, whereas with this lower ratio that we're using, adding more water would eventually start to bring out some of those negative attributes that a darker coffee might be present just because of how it was roasted.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like almost on the money.
Yep.
So just for the sake of knowing what it tastes like, I'm gonna now add an additional. So we were at 80 grams. I want to add an additional. Let's just go crazy. Let's add another 80 grams to it. This is higher than I said, but just to kind of give you an idea of what the dynamics are of it. And if you are a Patreon member, you will get access to not only this recipe, as you watching on YouTube are getting, but you're also going to get access to a few other recipes that are a little bit more detailed and use a bunch of different numbers for your own brewing at home. So make sure to subscribe to the Patreon to get access to those, but you will still have some other recipes. All right, so this one is with a total of now 160 grams bypass. We'll see how it is. Again, I also think a big reason why this kind of recipe would be favorable is in a cafe for two reasons. Firstly, the brew time on this is much shorter, between 1 to 2 minutes. And that doesn't sound like a crazy amount, but if you have 4 pour overs in a row, being able to shave off 1 to 2 minutes adds up really fast. In addition to, I think it's a little bit more forgiving in terms of like the TDS numbers that you're typically shooting for with filter coffee, using less pours overall. That lower brew temp as well is already kind of pulling out less of the attributes that might be there that we're artificially upping with our dilution. But
this could end up saving a lot of cups too.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree.
It's water, but
yeah.
I
will say out of all of them, it is more watery, of course. But a lot of that kind of like smokiness that is on the back end of a more developed coffee is almost gone.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. This is definitely, it takes more of the juicier note of like, I guess the fruits that are in it. So now it's more or less, it's almost like juice.
Yeah.
It's like a Capri Sun. Right?
Capri Sun is a perfect, like a cherry Capri Sun. One additional thing that Lance talked about in his video was that, at least on the AeroPress, that those TDS values being grossly under extracted is that they also have a lower caffeine volume. And of course, we don't have a tool with us to know the exact caffeine volume here or in his recipes. But I will say that is something to be considered as well with trying to maybe achieve different caffeination levels just with your brewing parameters, apart from the coffee itself. For somebody who doesn't want as much caffeine, but doesn't want a full decaf, or has some kind of decaf they like, this could be a good option as well.
Could you spread that like with like all coffees?
I'm sure, yeah.
Oh my gosh. You get coffee and just make it decaf?
But I mean, less cap.
Oh, less cap?
Yeah.
All right. Y'all want us to do that? Y'all want us to do that. That might be a video.
And as it's cool, I actually really like this.
This man's he loves tea.
That's our initial idea kind of behind some of these bypassing elements. There's lots of other ways to do this. I could have done this without using this whole Kalita hybrid v60 filter method. I didn't really talk about that a lot, but one of the biggest reasons I would say adding that cone-shaped filter is that it adds more contact overall in the dripper, whereas with a Kalita Wave filter, you have all these ridges, right, that we're all familiar with, where coffee will get kind of stuck up in between there. But with the cone-shaped filter in the flat bottom brewer, it kind of forces a lot of those grounds to be towards the center, towards the bottom, which overall, in my mind, is going to provide more even extraction and overall just, I think, a more balanced cup, ideally. And also, these filters are kind of expensive when you compare them to average cone-shaped filters.
They are. And you know what? The Kalita is not that expensive. So,
yeah.
Do what you got to do.
What you got to do.
I do think, though, this was the best way to do it, though, because I feel like if you had did this for the straight up V60, you would have definitely had to like if we had did that last pour, it would have just been gone, all the flavor.
Yeah, you're right, because those normal V60s already are kind of like light in body and don't have a lot of like intense dynamics to them. I think that's one reason why a lot of people opt for like the Kalita is because it does have much more pronounced fruitiness just innately due to the flat bottomed nature, as well as those extraction times typically are longer. They're probably leaning towards TDS and extraction values that are higher, and a lot of people find that really favorable, that you probably just don't get through a V60 most of the time.
Yeah. You probably could have went, like, if you want like the quicker result, you probably could have used the V60 filter with the Kalita filter, and it probably would have made it to like the right around the middle ground of it.
You're talking about like using 2 filters at one time?
I mean, like if you like using a V60 with the
Oh.
Kalita filter.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's another actually. That could be a whole other video in itself. I think
Mhm.
shoving one of these in a V60.
Oh yeah, that's
If you want to see that,
that's
let
it.
us know.
That's
We'll
it. Right.
definitely do it.
Hey, we're gonna do it anyway. We're just asking you guys. That's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right? You know.
I think that kind of sums up most of what I wanted to address today. There's going to be a lot more discussion about this. I am curious what you guys think about this recipe. I want you to try it out. It's going to be in the description of the video as well as on the screen throughout this video that you have seen already. And let us know what you think. If there's any coffees that you try this with that are maybe exceptional or maybe less than exceptional, we would love to hear from you. And don't forget the Patreon.
The Patreon.
See us on Patreon.
See us on Patreon. Yeah, to like and subscribe. Follow us on the Instagram too. I'm directing you to another app before we even finish with this one. Go over there. Like the video. Share it with your friends. Comment. Subscribe for more.
Happy brewing.